We are back with another episode of the Surfcast Podcast. Just a quick reminder, no matter where you follow us, you can subscribe to get notifications when new episodes come out. Make sure you do that, and also make sure you're following us on social media. We've started some videos, short videos, that are totally distinct from the episodes that you are listening to. Those have been going on for a little while now, so definitely go check those out on Instagram and Facebook. So today, Toby, we've got another episode of Surf Association. We haven't done one for 4 months now, so we decided it was time to do another one. And because we're coming into spring and we're getting dangerously close to the fishing season up here, when this comes out, people will already be fishing down south. But since we're getting dangerously close to the fishing season, we decided to do a spring-themed Surf Association, our first theme. Mm-hmm. So, I guess I'll start. You want me to start?
Yeah. Yeah, hop to it. You got the first one today.
All right. So this one you could answer with just one word, but I would like you to expand a little bit, okay?
Yep.
So very simply, in the spring, the big fish always arrive during the same 2-week window.
True. Yes, absolutely. I absolutely believe that, at least in my area, they do. And the reason, the 2-week window is actually a pretty good gap of time to consider. I can't remember if I mentioned it or before this. I know I wrote about it. Like, I actually did some research at one point with when historic giant spring fish were caught to see if there was like a correlation to moon or temps or anything that I could find additional other than the calendar. And it was eerily tight window of like about 2 weeks that just a whole load of it was like not just 50s, like 60s and even 70-pound fish were caught in the spring. So I started this whole theory in my mind about these big fish and when they came through and why, and it timed out. Like I said, it was about a 2-week window, and I'll throw this in for it. I was looking at Long Island Sound, I'm based in southern New England, and it was a 2-week window in May that they were always there, and it was going back data that I found. I looked at it in the like early 2000 teens, like whatever that's 13, 14, but the data that I looked at went back to the 50s.
Oh, wow.
And it was, when you look at the spread was nothing really before a certain date of the month, and then a couple after, but this window, this roughly 2-week, was like the lion's share. It was pretty cool to actually see that. So, yes.
Dying to comment, but not allowed to, so I will leave it there. That's interesting. That was cool information.
All right, so my first question is, in the spring, surfcasters in general mistakenly do blank too often.
Oh, man, this is going to steal my question, I think, that I want to ask you next. I'll skip the question then, because this is very similar to what I wanted to ask you. But okay. I think one of the things, if you are looking for consistent bites with larger fish, which obviously earlier in the spring, that has a different definition than later in the spring. So I understand I'm not talking about 40-pound fish all the time. Sometimes this could be 15-pound fish. This could be 10-pound fish. It could be 50-pound fish. But the thing that I think anglers do wrong is they focus too much around sunset. They focused in the spring to their detriment. They focused that hour before sunset to hour after is like this traditional time of like, this is when you got to fish in the spring because the water temperature, the fish, the bait, the blah, blah, blah. But I think that they do it for too long, and honestly, you probably don't even need to do it at all. So I think that focusing, if your goal, that is to be consistent with the biggest fish you can possibly catch, I think it's still fishing after dark. And I don't mean, from sunset to 45 minutes after, when the light's still, the sky is still light in the west, but instead really focusing a night, focusing on the tides, just like you would do the whole rest of the season. And that would be my biggest thing. It actually is good a lot because a lot of anglers who aren't interested in listening to a podcast or don't read articles or whatever, they go do that. So a lot of times that sort of sucks them out of any of your spots that you might fish early in the season that might be more popular. So maybe I just hurt us, Toby. I don't know.
Well, I know we're not supposed to comment, and I won't comment on your answer, but I will say, for what it's worth, my answer would be different. So if you do need to go back to that later, you probably could. But you don't have to.
Okay.
It's similar but different.
Well, now, yeah. Well, so, okay. All right. We'll see if we get there. So this question, I think I know your answer already, but I would like other people to hear this potentially. But actually, you know what? I don't know. I'll take that back. Too much preamble. Okay, here you go. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
It's important to start in the backwaters in spring first.
If you want to catch schoolies, perhaps, which is probably what you were thinking, I would say. The backwaters, I think saying important to start there is my problem with that. Certainly can consider that area, but I don't think that it's like an important thing to go there. I think you're better off if we're sort of along the theme of wanting to do better with larger fish more consistently. That's sort of looked at too often as where you go, because there's open water scenarios. You know, the open water is, I think, those backwaters generally considered warmer, so fish might be a little more active. Bait, there might be some smaller bait in there, sure, but I think those are generally associated with the wintering over spots. The backwaters, the smaller fish on average that just hang through the winter are going to be in those areas to begin with, whereas I think some of the larger fish we're looking for, more transient fish, generally going to be coming in. So I mean, for my means anyway, I'm going to sort of look away from those initially. I'm going to try to find those bigger fish, even those smaller numbers of fish in other areas coming into my waters. You do have the rare larger fish that does hang out through the winter. I mean, we were just talking before this recording of someone who got one in essentially what would be considered a backwater area in the winter. So they are there, but I think because you said important, that's where I sort of oppose that thought. You know, it's a consideration, but I don't think it's a big enough thing to really worry about or take into consideration as, like, you know, in the hierarchy. It's 5th, 6th level for me, I would say, and where I'm considering going. It might have, I'd say even more important is maybe perhaps relating to those backwaters because of the warmth that those can bring to the more open areas, the oceanfront spots. So see if that gets you to where you were intending with it.
Yeah, I'm not supposed to comment, but I'm gonna make one quick comment too.
Yeah.
We're both from New England, and I do hear a little bit. I almost feel like I have to give just a touch of disclaimer to say we're both in New England, because I know some of my New Jersey friends might adamantly disagree with what we're saying, but I'm not supposed to comment, but I just did.
Well, I say with that, I mean, backwaters, I'm thinking not rivers, you know, more, especially taking on that with New England, you know, we don't in general have these large, expansive flats and waters like that. You know, I'm thinking the big bays of Long Island or some of the Jersey ones. We don't really, for the most part, have that once we get into New England.
Sure. So Great. Yeah. Great disclaimer.
Yeah. I'm going to give you one here that it's a fill in the blank. So I'm saying this in your voice, but you're filling it in.
Okay.
The biggest hindrance to my spring fishing is...
Oof. The biggest hindrance to my spring fishing is...
There could be a lot of directions that you could go with this.
My life outside of fishing. It's the real life, because in the spring, nothing holds me back except for my real life. And usually, honestly, that's mostly my health. So I fish myself to a blunt nub in the spring. Spring is my favorite. Spring is my favorite time of year in the surf. And there is no work assignment. There is no obligation. There is no anything that comes first, practically, except for my literal ability to fish. So my ability to stand on my feet, my ability to drive safely, my ability to maintain my marriage. Those are about it. But even Carly, I mean, she knows. In the springtime, it's like, all right, I'll see you later. I'll see you in like July. For the next couple months, I'm going to be out. Now, of course, she's a teacher too, so we have more time together. Her schedule, her summers off, etc. So it's a little bit less of a big deal for me. But the biggest hindrance for me is just real life. So if something's due, if SJ's due or something like that, like I have to do it, and otherwise I would be fishing. And that's about it, because, I think a lot of anglers listening to this might say, oh, it's the cold. Oh, it's a storm. Oh, it's the, I don't know. But for me, none of those things matters. I love the storms, the cold. We've already had conversations about water temperature. That almost doesn't mean anything to me. When those dates hit, when those moons hit, it doesn't matter. It does not matter. And so for me, the biggest thing is just my energy, is my ability to just stay on my feet. And that's it. And drive safely. I know I already said it. I'm going to say it again. Driving safely. That is usually my threshold for how tired I am. Can I drive safely? Then I'm going fishing. So Toby, I just got my hands on Hoagie's new charter grade needlefish, one of the plugs they launched last season as part of their new Hook One platform. This thing is extremely well built. It swims great, and it's specifically built around a single belly hook and a tail flag, which I know you and I both strongly prefer. I'll tell you, I've heard nothing but good things from other anglers throughout the entire Striper Coast.
That's right. I've been hearing a lot of good things about their needlefish as well. I know it's got heavy-duty stainless steel through wire, so it's tuna-proof, and it comes with VMC hooks, premium split rings, and matching hand-tied bucktail flags. So essentially, it's got the works, all the things that you'd expect from Hoagie.
Definitely. Plus, the recent study from the state of Massachusetts showed you can reduce release mortality by as much as 7% by ditching that rear hook, as you and I have talked about already on the podcast. So this is a lure that's helping the fish. Without reducing your catch rate, you're doing your part to reduce release mortality.
And that's one of Hoagie's goals. They don't just build fishy gear. They think long-term about the fishery. It's all part of their updated motto that they now live by. Quality for today, conservation for tomorrow. So find out more about the mission and, of course, this awesome new needlefish at HoagieLures.com. As we've talked about on past episodes of the podcast, the plastic swimmer is one of the most popular plugs that's found in just about every surfcaster's bag, and there are a ton of models to choose from. With its unique body shape and lip design producing a great darting and swimming action, the standout is the Swarter by Joe Bag's Tackle.
That's right, Toby. This plug is fully through wired, and it's available in two sizes, the 6-inch 1-ounce model and the 7-inch 1.5-ounce model. Comes in a wide variety of traditional and modern fish-catching colors like bone, blurple, sand eel, and many more. The Swarter excels in a huge variety of surf fishing conditions, from back bays to inlets, and of course, the wide open surf. It's been proven to be a great plug on both the East and West Coast for a variety of species, but particularly the striped bass.
So head on over to joebagsoutdoors.com and grab some Swarters while you support a locally owned business. And while you're there, be sure to check out the annual limited edition colorway, as well as Joe's Swarter kits, specifically tailored to meet a variety of surf fishing scenarios.
So now I've got a fill in the blank for you. So you ready for fill in the blank? So this is your voice. Compared to summer and fall, spring is my blank time of the year in the surf. Take it whatever way you want.
Highly anticipated time of the year, because again, the season is a blank slate. Obviously I'm excited to go because, I haven't been surf fishing in a while, but I haven't settled into trends. I haven't figured things out. Everything is new. There's no current pattern set up. I'm certainly working off of past years, but the curveballs that come at you or at me in the spring generally are really unexpected. If it's the middle of the summer and a hurricane hits and throws off I kind of expected that coming, but I seem to run into more of those like unexpected ones in the spring, and it's a little more exciting for me because it's a more fresh, almost a youthful experience. The unknowing of what's happened, even though it's equally predictable and unpredictable as other times of the years. I find myself, the summer and fall getting into patterns, even more so working off of changes in patterns. So it's like, I'd say that it's more exciting for me in the spring in that regard. In addition to the fact that it's just a brand new season, I haven't fished in a while and I got the itch. But it's cool what comes at me in new ways that I'm learning on the fly in the spring.
Interesting. You said something really interesting there too. I'm not gonna point it out. People need to go back and listen to it because there's something really interesting that you said. So, all right.
Okay. This was the last question I came up with, and I think it was it's the one that I most want to know.
Okay.
Of what I'm going to ask you today. So the question is the presence of bait in the surf more important, less important, or equally important to your success in the spring as any other part of the season?
Way less important. Way less important. So in the spring for me with my fishing, now again, disclaimer, I'm in New England. I don't even know if I generally call it southern, but I guess it is. It's certainly not southern for the stripers, but I'm in New England, so keep that in mind. But way less important. For me, I am of the old school camp, I think it's old school, of migration. I am thinking about fish movements in the spring more than I am in the summer, and even more than I am in the fall. And I know, in the fall, migration, blah, 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 blah. Honestly, for me, the fall is way, way more bait-driven. It's by far the most bait-driven of the three seasons, if you want to do that. In spring, it means absolutely nothing to me. And in the summer, it means something to me. And in the fall, it means a little bit more to me. And we've been very open about how bait may or may not mean what it means to other anglers and how it's definitely not in the top tier even really of what we're focusing on. But in the spring, it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. Now, one big disclaimer, another big disclaimer to that is that, yes, there's two spots that I fish where herring move around, and that can matter. But that's not why I'm there. That's not the pattern that I'm fishing. I'm fishing a pattern, and I'm fishing around a moon. And the reason I'm there is because there's a moon happening, and the tide is a certain thing. And probably, actually, honestly, for both of those things, the wind is a certain thing for both those spots too, which is interesting. I don't know if I've had that thought because they're not at all similar. But anyways, in the spring, I am thinking migration. Where are the fish moving? How are they moving? When are they moving? That's it. And then I fish patterns, gangbusters. Pattern. There's no real... I may line up some spots and do what I've talked about in last year about like the fall, what I call the fall run. Again, my really original name for running around in the fall. I may do that in the spring, but it's like even more scalpel precision. There's no like, I'll just try here and, maybe I'll give this a look. It's like, no, none of that. It is, I'm doing this and I'm doing this and I'm staying here. And if this doesn't work, I'm going home because tomorrow night I got to do it all again. So that's how I feel.
Yeah, and not where I thought it was going.
Okay. So I have I have a bait question for you as a follow. This is great. People are going to think we planned this. This is fantastic. Well, I know you're not focused on bait, or I think you're not focused on bait. In the spring, is there a bait you are particularly excited about if it appears besides bunker? You can't choose bunker. So besides bunker, in the spring, is there a particular bait that you're exceptionally excited about if it shows up?
By if it shows up, you mean not just generally over the whole area, or at that particular given spot I'm fishing?
In
like
your
I walk
spot.
out, I'm like, oh crap, there's this here.
That's what I mean more.
Yep. So, yes, if I was to encounter herring in a place that I do not consider a herring location, meaning it's not associated with a herring run. There's not one generally nearby, because a lot of what I do in the spring does somewhat relate to the herring runs, even if it's just sort of a location that leads to one. But there are places that I fish in the spring that really have I know herring go by there, but I've never run into them there. I've never actually seen them, but I know they're coming through. So if I was, like, I have one spot I'm thinking it through. If I got down there and I saw some herring, I would be really psyched.
Freaking out.
To see them. Yeah. Because again, I know they come through there because of where this one spot is in relation to a herring run. But no one would ever consider that a herring run spot. Like, it's far enough removed, so that they're going to be there at some point in time. But if I saw them, I would be excited, because presence of a larger bait at that place, taking the bunker out, when there's bunker there, anywhere I'm excited. But to actually see herring in that spot would be pretty cool. And it's a spot that I know has, on the later part of the season, when the juvenile herring are dumping out, they do kind of relate to this spot. So again, I know they're around. They gotta be there, but to actually see them that close, like if I was to be able to witness them and see them there, I'd be pretty psyched. I can't say that I would change my approach on the fly in any way, but my motivation to continue casting would absolutely be ramped up, because I'd be in the anticipation of every single cast. Then would be that maybe my lure is looking like that one herring that got separated from his school, and that giant big mama bass is sitting there and happens to see it. So I would definitely have, I'd give it an extra 25% of the night longer than I planned, at least.
Nice. Cool. So. Not exactly what I thought you were going to say. Cool.
And I there's other baits, but they would not get me as excited. That would be the most exciting one for me.
Cool.
I've run into others in other places, but all right. All right, here we go. So in the spring, fishing reports, either through the grapevine, meaning through any of your contacts, or officially published fishing reports, whether it's the Fisherman Magazine or On the Water, things like that. Are the fishing reports more or less important to you in the spring? And if it's more, how so? How do they apply?
All right, so this is going to be this is an easy answer, actually, and I'm going to say they're more important in the spring for me, but not for the reason anyone's probably guessing. So I'm going to give it just a beat for people to listen guessing. So the reason they're more important for me is because they're emotionally important to me. They're emotionally important because I like reading them. And I like knowing what's going on. I like seeing other guys catching fish because it's getting me friggin' amped up. And I'm getting amped up by this conversation anyways. So for me, that's where the value of the report is. I'm not chasing them. And in the fall, honestly, sometimes I'll look because I kind of want to know what's going on. But in the spring, they're way more important because I just want to read them and I just want to get psyched. And I don't even care, honestly, how accurate they are half the time. I just want to get psyched, so I'm reading them. But okay, that's a little bit of a cop-out answer. So let me give you something a little bit more meat to it, to the listener. I think I might even have talked about this, but I talked about this in my seminars, and it's a little too complicated maybe for the time I have here. But I will use reports from other areas to signify to me what stage of the season we're in, and I cannot comment on the 2-week question I asked you, but I agree. Let me just put it that way. But there are certain bites and certain patterns for me that can be off almost a full moon, really. And if I can link them to reports from many regions away, I can figure out what I should be focusing on and when in terms of my patterns. So to be even a little bit more specific, I might be fishing in Massachusetts, but if something is happening in New Jersey on X week, I know I have X weeks or X moon to prepare myself for that upcoming bite. And that's how I'll use it. And I definitely do that more in the spring than in the fall. So, but honestly, again, go back to the emotional part. I'm checking out on the water and the fishermen and everything just because I want to get psyched, motivation wise.
All right.
So, here's one. I think we're getting down. This is my last question, right? This is my last one I get to ask you.
Yeah. I was hoping we'd have time for a bonus, but we'll keep them wanting more.
So I really want to know this question, and it's a little bit long, so I'm going to take a second to read it. Many anglers have said that the 6-week period from the end of May to the beginning of July is the best period and the shot at catching a biggest fish of the year. Dave Aronson is probably the best known as in the contemporary anglers for saying this. I would like to hear your perspective on that idea.
Okay, I actually have, it relates to my earlier note about the 2-week window. I think that concept relates to fish coming out of the Chesapeake as opposed to the Hudson fish. So I feel it's more based off of the Long Island through Montauk into Rhode Island spring, because it sort of coincides with anyone who's familiar with the boat fishing on Block Island. It's like the body of massive fish arrive there roughly by, to make it easy, July 4th. So you kind of go into that window. That's, 2/3 of the way through that 6-week window is roughly July 4th. So I sort of felt there's this body of fish that come up the coast. It's probably those that come out of the Chesapeake. They work through Long Island, or along the South Shore of Long Island, past Montauk to Block, and then filter into Rhode Island. That's, again, the biggest fish. It's those, the super mega cows. But if you're working off of the Hudson fish, based on what I said before with that 2-week window, it's earlier than that. It's if you wait, let's say, until June 1st, you've missed that push. Now, if you're in a great location that somehow has both bodies fishable, you could turn the 6-week into like a 9-week window, let's say.
Great. Love that.
Okay. With a little bit of a lull, it's sort of like with river herring in the spring. You've got the alewives that come in early, and then when they're dumping out, you've got the blueback. So you have like this Goldilocks perfect scenario of like the crossover of the two baits coming through the rivers because of when they enter and leave and spawn. So you've got that sort of with those two different migrational groups based off their spawning river or locations. That, there's a little time where they sort of both intersect and then settle in, but I think those bigger Hudson are already settling in when the Chesapeakes are sort of already, are just getting there. So I think especially based off of like what Dave is saying, without giving anything away of Dave's, but being more of a Rhode Island guy, and that area sort of north, perhaps if you're looking there, it is that window. But I look at slightly further to the south, even just southern New England, and certainly so if you get to New Jersey, it's sort of passed by that window. But again, knowing Dave's perspective, it absolutely makes the most sense. And
yep.
The only thing I can really connect it to is based on the migration of those, depending on their spawning location, because, there's different theories of how far those fish leave after they come out of their areas. There's more supposed movement to the Chesapeakes versus the Hudsons and so on. So there's pieces to sort of support why I would assume that. But again, it's just my thoughts on it. There's not a ton of science to put behind that. It's just sort of what I've seen, what I've experienced, and what I've inferred from that information.
Sure.
So,
all right, last question.
All right. Last one, and I've got two that I really wanted to get to, but we've already gone long on this, so I'm just going to put it to true or false, obviously in your perspective. In the spring, I am more willing to accept catching smaller fish than at any other time of the season.
Oh, no. Complete opposite. No. False. No. In the fall, I'm way more willing to catch smaller fish because the season's almost over. Late fall, I'm just like, oh my God, I want to just be out here. I stop worrying about numbers. In the spring, I feel the pressure getting the 40. I got to get that fucking 40. I gotta get that 40. I gotta get that 40. And yeah, 30s, whatever. But I'm thinking 40 pounds. Pounds, by the way. Inches. Not inches. Not inches. No. We're talking 50 inches. Like, that's what I'm thinking. And I feel frantic. And I feel an energy. I got that big fish energy. And I don't want anything to do with small fish. I mean, yeah, okay, look. The first 2 or 3 trips, if I catch schoolies, I'm like, okay, that's cool. But I am transitioning so fast out of that because, honestly, my bonus season, I can do that now, which is like the preseason, like early spring, kind of holdover-y stuff. And so I can kind of get my fill of that pretty quick. But if we're talking end of April, beginning of May, I'm already out. I'm done. I'm done with those small fish. It's over. I've moved on. And I am so less willing to catch small fish. I don't want anything to do with them. I want to only be focused on the big fish because I mean, now I'm commenting, but it's only in the context of this. I actually really agree with Dave where I fish that, and we're making Dave feel like he's the only one who's ever said it, but he's not, obviously. We're putting it all on you, Dave. I actually do think that that's been my most consistent time to get that 40, to get those 40s, is that period in the spring. And so I have to my detriment, to my pain, it hurts, right? I see guys catching teen-size herring fish, and they're like hammering them. They're fish on herring, that's what I mean, herring fish. And I'm jealous because I'm like, what am I doing? What am I doing out here? I could have 25 fish between 10 and 22 pounds, but I caught nothing. But that's because I know. I'm going to go out there and say, there's no rules, but I'm going to say this. I know that I'm not going to catch that big fish doing that. I'm going to catch it doing what I'm doing. And that's it. So I'm not willing. No. False. End of story. Stop listening to everybody. Stop. Whatever you're thinking about small fish, forget it. This spring, you're only going to focus on big fish. You're going to take the Jerry philosophy. So that's what I'm saying to that. And we'll see you next time on the podcast. And we're always looking for feedback on the Surf Association. This has been a weekly edition of the Surfcast Podcast. You can find out more about the podcast at surfcastpodcast.com, or definitely check us out on social media, Facebook, Instagram, at the Surfcast Podcast.